any king or anyone in power was, from the minute it was signed in 1215, troubled by Magna Carta. Magna Carta was something elemental, foundational, and fundamental. It had the audacity to have the king accept that he wasn't above the law. It's a big deal. And forever after, for the next 800 years, anyone in power, governments included, once you get beyond the time of absolute monarchy and you get to the time when England and then Britain is controlled by a parliament, here today, gone tomorrow, politicians and governments also don't like Magna Carta. They've never liked it because it's a challenge to power. And I'm certainly not an expert on the law, but I encourage anyone who's interested in rights and freedom to contemplate Magna Carta and to pay attention to the fact that ever since it was signed, anyone in power has sought to edit it, change it, water it down, repeal its contents. It amounts to 63 clauses, I think. I think that's right. It's about 3,500 words long. And everyone with their hands on the levers of power has been bothered by Magna Carta's existence. That's a fact. And it's interesting to note that by now, and for a long time, anyone I got it at school as well, you're invited to accept that Magna Carta's it's gone now. It's a lovely thing to go and see in the museum. It's a nice thing to have a look at, but it doesn't matter. That's what they tell you. It's all been superseded by more recent legislation. That's an important word to remember. Legislation, which is to say laws that Parliament and the judiciary have come up with since. And so Magna Carta, if you look it up, I looked it up today. I looked up Wikipedia. I know you're not supposed to do that anymore, but I did. And Magna Carta is described in Wikipedia as an important symbol of liberty today. And that's an interesting choice of words. Symbol of liberty. So it's telling you there, it's not liberty itself. It's just a symbol. But it's worth contemplating an alternative, much buried, much obscured, much obfuscated reality that Magna Carta is, as it always was, liberty itself, freedom made manifest. And the men in suits and the judges with their wigs that sit in the high courts, they'd rather you think it doesn't matter. And so they treat Magna Carta a bit like a doddery old relative, some elderly relative who just stubbornly won't die. But they would rather he was out of the way. A bit sick and tired of him. But Magna Carta is still there. And it's just worth considering why that might be. And in some respects, as I say, I'm no lawyer. I'm no expert on this. But there's an extent to which Magna Carta is too deep for anything that has happened since to touch in a way that they don't really want to admit the would-be powerful. They'd like you to think that Magna Carta's doddery old fella sat in his armchair at the very end of his twilight years. But there's life in the old dog yet. For example, we're invited to think all the time that, and they told us during Brexit, amongst other times, but they said during Brexit that Parliament was sovereign. That was a phrase that reverberated around. And it's not. What's sovereign is the people. And I'm using that in like a collective noun. The people. Us. We, and only we, are sovereign. Parliament, government, everything is subject to us. That is an inalienable truth. That is part of the tradition that's remembered as common law or natural law. No parliament can reach back far enough to do away with Magna Carta because it existed before them. They didn't create Magna Carta. So in no meaningful way, you can argue, can they actually touch it, far less rip it out. No matter how deep they dig around the tree of freedom, the tree of truth, the taproot of Magna Carta is out of their reach. And I say that, I offer that up just as a notion, as a thought, but it helps to explain why for 800 years since Magna Carta, the powerful have always been sniffing around it, trying to get at it. And they've educated all of us since to think that we needn't worry about it anymore. And it's just not the case. I encourage anyone to go and have a look at this for themselves, because it's so inspiring in a way to be reminded that these old ideas, they weren't whipped up out of nowhere. They come in a sense, that idea of making judgments based on your conscience, trusting that people who pay attention, who listen to evidence, can come to an honourable and honest judgment from their own conscience and sense of natural law, is deeply and profoundly important. And when it comes to thinking about safeguarding our rights and freedoms and privileges, it probably matters more than anything else to remember that we as individuals, each one of us, is sovereign. And together, the people are sovereign. We hold the power. We are in control of the government. And at any point, if we as people submit or surrender, or through some kind of collective absent-mindedness, imagine that the government that drafts legislation also has the power overall to apply that law without challenge from the people, then we have wandered carelessly into a dictatorship. That is almost the definition of tyranny. If the people who legislate also have the power to administer punishment, at that point the people have abdicated their responsibility for everything, and that's a profound wrong. The idea is that there are deep truths, and we forget them as individuals and as societies and civilizations. But there's a way in which, and there's a manner in which we don't completely forget them. And some people go kind of fumbling towards them as though in the dark, or as though through a cloud of fog. They can sense that there's something there, which is the truth. And they try and navigate their way towards it. And they don't always find it. They don't always touch it, but they get close enough. And I think in this time that we've been through, these last 2 years, where people have lost sense of where they are, to some extent, some people have even felt as if they've lost their grip on reality, that they don't know anymore which way is up. But all they cling to and know is that something is wrong. And that comes from their natural sense of right and wrong. And it empowers and enables people, if only they would trust themselves, to work their way back towards the truth, to work their way back to the gold of truth. And in the context of our rights and freedoms, there's something there. The powers that be, for their own reasons, have hidden it. They've put it out of sight, and they've preferred to think that it doesn't matter, but it does matter, and it's still there. And no matter how hard they try, they can't finally erase it. It's there where it always was. And if we can just find our way back to it, we'll have the truth. And I think when you consider rights and freedoms and the common law and natural law and a document like Magna Carta, cast aside what you've been told, open your mind, and allow for the possibility that you can find your way all the way back to the truth.